Welcome, I'm Terry Christensen, and this is Valley Politics, on a new set as we launch our 50th show and our 5th year. Let us know what you think. Today we'll focus on what happens when working families are driven out of their homes because of rising rents and home prices. And then our guests, Zelica Rodriguez of Somos Mayfair and Noel Fernandez of Silicon Valley Rising, both of whom are leaders in the fight against displacement. Later, on Where Are They Now?, we'll talk with Rigo Chacon, a longtime TV newsman and the first Latino in such a role locally. I think the issue that caused a big backlash when Rigo started his career will surprise you. All this next on Valley Politics. Welcome everyone, and welcome Zelica Rodriguez of Somos Mayfair and Noel Fernandez of Silicon Valley Rising and Working Partnerships USA. So we're here today to talk about displacement. We've heard from some people who are facing displacement right now. So this is what happens when people get pushed out of their homes because of rising rents and home prices. Sometimes the house sells, sometimes it just goes to renters who can afford more. Why is this a crisis now in San Jose? Zelica?
I think that we're already starting to see a lot of people moving to the Central Valley, a lot of people moving to Stockton because they clearly can no longer afford to stay in San Jose. This has a lot of impacts on family stability, right? Being able to get the kind of education that they deserve, being able to have long-term health services, right? In case there's things that come up. And so we're starting to see more people accessing more housing services, and people just coming through our doors saying, we don't know what we're gonna do. Maybe we're okay now, and by okay meaning we're living in a really cold garage, but pretty soon, if this continues, we actually don't know where we're gonna live.
And Somos Mayfair isn't a housing organization, is it?
No, we're a place-based organization that is really set up to address the evolving needs of our community. And so displacement has become that for us, and everything that has to do with displacement. Because it's not just having access to affordable housing, but also being able to protect yourself even in the housing that you currently do have.
Maria, why is this happening now? Is this just a normal part of what happens in a successful economy and in a capitalist system? Why are we reaching crisis proportions now?
I mean, I think the way that we see it is that we call it economic displacement. So yes, housing prices are going up, but what we also know is that people's income is actually going down. If you look at data from 2009 to 2015 in San Jose, home prices and rent has gone up 32%. But when you look at people's income, it's gone down 2.8%.
Wow.
And so people are really struggling to make ends meet, and we're seeing that every single day in our communities, workers who are making the choice to have to be on the road for 4 hours a day and commute from Tracy or Modesto or even further.
Wow. So what can be done about it? Big pay raises would help. Access to lots more housing would help. What are the policies that your organizations are advocating? Let's start with one from you, Zelica. Just one, and then we'll kind of alternate.
So we're currently working on a preference policy to really support families who are currently living in a 2-mile radius of a new development that actually get first dibs on some of the affordable housing, right? That's been interesting because I think we have examples from San Francisco and from Oakland. It's something that we're trying on for size in San Jose to figure out if it would actually help.
Why isn't that just automatic? It totally makes sense, but I'm helping some community folks advocate some affordable housing, some near Mayfair, others closer to the Church of Five Wounds and that side of 101. And the developers say, well, no, if there's federal money involved, we can't give geographic preference.
Right. I think that it should be, I mean, you would think, right? Like, how do we preserve and protect the families that are currently living in the space? But there's a lot of conversations also around if you give preference to one group of people, who are you the opposite of giving preference to, right? Like, so who are you discriminating against? And that has been a little bit of the conversation. It's like, well, at the same time acknowledging that maybe the people who don't have preference have a lot more choices than maybe people who are currently living within that area.
Yeah, or they might have greater need.
Or they, exactly.
Yeah. So working on preference policies so that local residents or workers get first priority
That's right.
for new affordable housing.
Right.
What's another policy we're looking at?
I mean, one really big one for us is around tech development and really looking at how can we make sure that there are community benefits that are addressing displacement and affordable housing when we're looking at the expansion of tech. You know, think Google coming to San Jose is a huge one for our community. And what we're saying is we need to make sure that commitments around addressing affordable housing and displacement are really a priority as this project moves forward.
So community benefits from, how does that work? You just make them put more money into housing? Or?
I mean, there's a few different ways. There's some money in production. We absolutely believe we need to be building more affordable housing,
Yeah.
but there's also some policies around making sure what Zelica was talking about in terms of preservation, that there are policies in place that the city is going to actually be championing to make sure that the tenants that are currently here have some very strong protections. One important example, just last year, given a lot of community effort and work, there were some protections for tenants passed. What we know is that unfortunately there's now an effort from some landlords and their lobbyists to actually overturn that. And so when we talk about leadership in the city to address displacement, it's about thinking about progressive policies, but it's also making sure the policies we have in place are strong and that we're building the best. And we're actually saying any person, organization that comes into this community, institution, or business has to be a good neighbor. And so when we think about Google or any other company coming here, that they're actually putting in real dollars for affordable housing.
So community benefits for corporate development, local preference for access to affordable housing, renters' rights and rent control. Anything else, Zelica?
I think rent control for businesses too, like small
Oh,
businesses
small
have to be
businesses,
able
yeah.
to exist and thrive, right? And I'll just say that I think, it's not about, just these policies, but really the menu, and also not having a displacement conversation being a siloed conversation, because displacement absolutely impacts, education, health, the workforce, right? Like all these different things. I commute from Hayward because I cannot afford to live in San Jose, right? And so I am someone who speaks the language, who has, legal stat, right? There's all these different things, and I'm having to think about my own quality of
Yeah.
life. And that's not even talking about pollution and climate change that
Yeah.
also impact.
I'm glad you mentioned small businesses because they're real victims of displacement as well. Most of the new developments have retail on the ground floor, but the rents on that
Right.
retail on the ground floor are beyond the reach of existing businesses
That's right.
that may get pushed out. I'm sorry, Marie, you were going to make
No,
another point.
that prompted me to think about a really important point is when we think about displacement, we have to be looking at the racial element.
Right.
And displacement and the housing crisis affecting all of us. I think we all have a cousin or aunt or someone that's being touched by this, or ourselves. But when we actually look at displacement in San Jose, we have to be calling out that women of color specifically are being the hardest hit. Almost 60% of women of color in San Jose cannot afford rent. And so we have to be addressing this issue holistically, but also calling out the realities for working class women of color.
Good point. One thing we haven't quite mentioned is just increasing the housing supply. And it seems like the city and the county and the state are becoming increasingly committed to doing that. The county voters passed a $950 million bond a couple of years ago. The city's recently put $100 million into helping build, I think, 1,000 units in the next year. The mayor set a goal of 25,000. The governor's talking about it. Do you think they're all doing enough? I know what your answer is. Let's hear Zelica's first.
No, I don't think the answer is just to build more. I mean, that's a part of it,
Yeah.
right? That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
But again, who has access to that housing, right? Are people going to be able to afford, even if it's affordable housing, is it actually affordable? And are
Right,
people able to
right.
maintain that for time?
Maria?
Well, yeah, and I completely agree with that. And I would also say that we, the everyday people, have a very important role in this to make sure that we're building an army of people that are saying yes to affordable housing, but that we're also saying yes to preservation and protection. And that's really going to be up to all of us to build the political will in our leadership to be stronger than ever, pushing so that government creates affordable housing, but also pushes on our corporate partners as well.
Well, I totally agree. And there's the other side of this, the NIMBY side, not in my backyard.
Right.
So plenty of affordable housing projects that may have city or county or state support, are rejected because neighborhoods react negatively. I guess one good sign is now there is a YIMBY movement, yes, in my backyard. The folks I work with around the Church of Five Wounds call themselves YIMBYs. There is a YIMBY organization called Catalyze Silicon Valley that will go and advocate. So there's some balance. When the NIMBYs come forward, there's some balance to that. And 10 years ago, you know, there wasn't. It was really one side, the negative side.
I think one of the things that I admire about San Jose is that it's still a tight-knit city, right? Like, it's still tight-knit communities, regardless of where you land. And I think that through these conversations, because of the fact that San Jose is at a tipping point, there's also more conversations around the common good. And when you're all in it together, right? Because at some point you might be doing well, but I think it's like everyone is 3 paychecks away from being homeless, right? And so when we think about that, how do we also take care of each other, and what is that responsibility that we have? I think that's especially wrong with our entire country right now, that no one is coming at it from that mindset. So can San Jose be championing that shift in the narrative?
Yeah, I think it's also important, coming back to Maria's point a little bit, that people recognize the range of people who really are in housing crisis. An assistant professor at San Jose State, a new professor at San Jose State, would qualify, even with a family of 4, or even as a single person, as lower income for affordable housing. Not low income or extremely low, but the kind of the top range. So that's a range of people in positions that are really middle class. It was different when I came to San Jose, because I could buy a house on a single income.
Wow.
As an assistant professor.
Wow.
That's all gone.
Yeah.
So we're really talking about a wide range of working families and working people. Well, Maria, you were kind of getting us into the politics and the political movement, as you were too, Zelica. So what are your 2 organizations doing to build pressure to actually implement some of these policies? Maria?
Yeah, I mean, so first and foremost, what we're doing is creating spaces for people to use their voice. You know, ever since the beginning of Silicon Valley Rising, and especially with the Google project and the campaign, what has been a priority is for everyday people to tell their story and to be leading the movement and really creating pressure, positive pressure, on our elected friends to have them have space to be bold and to ask for more. And as we continue in this process to address this crisis, we need more of that. We need people going to community meetings. We need them going to those coffees that they have with their elected officials, doing those surveys, and really having their voice heard, because implementation is key. And you know, we're in a place now, particularly on the Google project, where community benefits are now part of the conversation, and they weren't a year ago.
Yeah.
It's going to be up to us to make sure that they're done in a way that really serves our communities.
Zelica?
Yeah, I mean, I think exactly what Maria just said. Creating space for community to really share their voice is one, right? And I also think being able for them to think about the solutions that they also want to see implement is another, right? So how are they also talking about it, but also taking direct action, whether it be at the local level or thinking about different kinds of community ownership, right? There's a lot of, co-ops that we're looking that are springing up because people are saying, hey, we can't necessarily depend on our elected officials and our decision makers to do what's right for us all the time. So how do we come together as a community and start buying back some of our land and start redistributing it a bit differently?
And Somos is considering a community land trust, right?
We are we're in the learning, exploring phases.
It happens other places.
But it does happen other places.
Yeah.
And I think for us, our model is to always look at alternative systems and use that as a way to, as an organizing tool, right? So when you're able to think, hey, this really works here, maybe this is something that we can consider. But people are doing really cool things across the nation because I think, one way or another, you're seeing, displacement in a lot of places.
So organizing and mobilizing, but the people you're organizing and mobilizing are probably the people least able to be active. They're working 2 jobs, they've got families, they're worrying about displacement, they're worrying about meeting the rent, and you're saying, come to a council meeting, come to a march. Yeah. How do you get those folks engaged and keep them engaged?
I mean, I think number one is that they're the most at risk, to your point, and they have the most on the line. And what we've seen is that There are absolute realities, logistical realities to organizing a community that's being displaced, but they love this place. We love this place, and there is a commitment to figuring this out and really motivating our elected leaders to be bolder than ever. And so they show up, and that means that sometimes we're playing a kid's video in the back of a council meeting for the kids that are in the back.
Yeah.
But that means that they care, and that means that they're ready to fight for this place that they love.
I'll also add that I think another way is also pushing on not just elected leaders, but like some of these big organizations that maybe haven't stepped into the conversation or sent in their letter of support or opposition, whatever the case may be. But some of these big organizations that have a lot of influence with our elected leaders, how do they also step into this conversation? Because at the end of the day, the families that they're serving are all grappling with this. Like these are all things that families are dealing with. And so how do we also push on them to take a bolder stance?
I know you two are pretty good community organizers, and I know you already know one way you get folks like that engaged is making it a good place to come, making them feel welcome, making them feel part of a leadership, not just passive people sitting in seats. And also when they win a few fights, that really helps keep people engaged. But I think a lot of people underestimate the social aspects of organizing to sustain organizations.
That's right.
Where are you getting pushback from? Who's pushing back? Who doesn't like what you're doing?
Look, I think in many ways, particularly as we look at tech development, we're seeing some folks that think we're being too visionary, or we're being too bold, or we're asking for too much. And time and time again, through vote after vote and hearing people's stories, the reality that I'm seeing is that we may not be pushing hard enough. We have to continue to be bolder and continue to put out a real vision. And like I said, create space for our electeds and other decision makers to understand that they can no longer take baby steps.
Right.
Our community is in a crisis, and we need folks to really take action to address displacement and gentrification.
I concur. I think that's exactly right. And I also think talking with developers, I mean, I know that there's developers that are, more willing to have a community process, more willing to have conversations, but we also know there's interest there, right? And so how do we also engage with those interests to continue to push for what we
In my
deserve?
experience, developers that want to succeed are happy to find some YIMBYs to be on their side.
Right.
So that can actually be an advantage, talking with them, letting them know there's support available. Who in political leadership has picked up the flag for this and is running with it? Who's been helpful? Name names.
Oh, juicy. I haven't seen anyone really step into that space, if I'm being really honest. I think that there's those one-on-one conversations with community leaders, and they say, oh, we know. Feedback that we've gotten as an organization is, we get it, we don't necessarily need to hear testimony anymore. And we're like, but the actions aren't aligning with you getting it. And maybe understanding it from a conceptual place and not necessarily from like a real place is different. And the sense of urgency, I think, has been something that's been lacking. And part of it, I think, is because we feel like we have some time to figure this out. And from somebody who grew up in San Francisco and saw their community completely change, that moves really, really quickly. So if you feel like you have time, you don't.
Maria, you want to name any names? We just have a few seconds left.
My sense is this is not just one flag. We haven't seen the type of leadership really from anyone quite yet to really say this is our champion on this. We've seen small champions on small issues, but we need strong leadership to really address this.
Maybe you need to start running for office or generating candidates then. Become the decision makers.
Well, we're always working on the leadership pipeline and really making sure that our communities are really in decision-making places. So that's a priority, I think, both of us have.
That's right.
We are out of time. We're going to put up the contact information for both of your organizations. But Maria Noel Fernandez from Silicon Valley Rising, Zelica Rodriguez from Somos Mayfair, thank you so much for being with us today. Really good conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Next on Where Are They Now, we talk with longtime TV newsman Rigo Chacon. Welcome, Rigo Chacon.
Thank you very
Glad
much.
to have you with Valley Politics today, because you've been part of the history of the Valley. The first Latino reporter in the Valley, first to establish a South Bay bureau for a San Francisco station, a real trendsetter. What got you into broadcast journalism? This was in the 1970s you got started, right?
I got started in October of '71. I was in a spelling bee contest in El Paso when I was 12.
Yeah.
And I won it, and there was an article in the paper, and somebody from the El Paso Herald-Times interviewed me. And in there I was quoted as saying that I wanted to be a television reporter.
Wow.
So
How old were you?
I was 12.
Yeah.
And I had fairly recently to that, fairly prior to that, I didn't speak English because I was born in Mexico. And I went to first grade twice because they put me back in first grade. But once I learned how to speak, when you speak another language, especially the Romantic languages, you become a good speller in English, and that's what helped me. And that was the reason for the
spelling bee.
For the interview. And I guess that's when I wanted. Ever since then, it's when I wanted to become a news reporter, and eventually I got the phone call.
Well, how did you actually make it happen? You went to San Jose State, I think.
Well, I went to San Jose State for 14 units.
Yeah. Oh, really? That still makes you an alum.
And I'm not sure that those 14 units are complete.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember going for the finals.
Oh, wow.
But I was fairly active as a young man. I was, student body president and active in the community and so forth. There was an organization that had been very much a part of Cesar Chavez's career. It's called CSO, Community Service Organization.
Big deal in San Jose in the 50s and 60s.
In the 50s and
especially.
60s. And in '68, I became president of that.
Oh.
So I got to know people like Norman Netta and folks like that.
Yeah.
As a young man, I was only 21, and got to know the players. And when Fred Lacoste, who was then the news director at Channel 11, when he decided to go out and hire somebody who would be representative of a growing community, those folks, Mineta and Cesar Chavez and other people said, well, you should call Rigo. Ask him if he's interested. And I was interested long before he called. So I got home and my wife said, Fred Lacoste called you. And I said, you're right.
Yeah.
So I called, and sure enough, I recognized his voice instantly. And I was hired. I was interviewed 3 days later, and I was hired 2 weeks later.
And this is 1971?
September of '71. October 4th of '71 was my first day.
And the career goes on to
2003.
2003. Right. So were there any other Latino reporters in broadcast journalism in the Bay Area when you started?
No.
What was it like being the first? Was there a lot of pressure on you?
It was exhilarating, but it was horrible. Hate mail that would make my white friends cry. Because I said Rigo Chacon, and I guess they wanted me to say Rigo Chacon.
Yeah.
I say it like I say it. I tell people I say it like my parents say it. And at that time I decided to say San Jose as part of the sign-off. That really prompted the hate mail. And people who speak Spanish and English, and you have an audience out there that speaks Spanish also.
Yeah.
If you say San Jose, they're going to laugh.
Yeah. Then you're a sellout to that community.
Right. So I had no choice. You couldn't win. If I said San Jose, I would get hate mail. If I said San Jose, I would get hate mail. If I say San Jose, my buddies that I would run into at the store would say, "Hey, what the hell's going on with this San Jose business?" You know.
Yeah.
And so
Was there pressure from one side that you were paying too much attention to the Latino community, and from the other side, not enough?
it was felt that in San Jose, Rigo Chacon News 11 was flag waving,
Yeah.
kind of, you know, a nationalistic thing, and it wasn't. I was just saying. I made a decision to say San Jose because I think a huge pocket of the viewing audience would expect me to say that.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to change Rigo Chacon. There's no way.
Yeah.
That's my name.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that was kind of a sad part of my early years, but it never went away. It just fizzled down.
Well, you educated other people, and really moved the whole process of integrating the full community forward.
And I don't think people react anymore like, you know, Damon Trujillo says San Jose.
Yeah.
So I think all that went away also. So
Yeah.
it was part of being the first one.
So 25 years plus of reporting. What were some
32
of the,
altogether.
32 altogether. What were some of the big stories you covered? What?
The biggest story, hands down, was the 1985 Mexico City earthquake.
And were you there? Did you go there?
I went there. We took off the same day.
Yeah.
And Channel 7 has tremendous resources. So they put me on a Learjet in no time. Took off from Hayward and headed south. And they weren't allowing planes to land in Mexico City because of the earthquake. But then I asked the pilot, I said, ask him about general aviation. Ask him if we can come in on general aviation so as not to take up the big runways. And they said yes. So we were the first American crew to land in Mexico City.
Wow.
Just by that one question.
Did you win an Emmy for that?
I won a third of an Emmy. There's a category where you enter three things.
Yeah.
And I entered the Mexico City earthquake, the Lexington fire, which was the same year, and a story that I call My Buddies on the Wall. It's a story I did about 4 buddies whose names are on the Vietnam Wall in Washington.
Wow.
So that trifecta was what.
Yeah, that was the Emmy.
That was the second Emmy. The first one I won at Channel 11.
You've been watching San Jose politics and Santa Clara County politics for beyond your broadcast career. What are the biggest changes you've seen over your almost 50 years observing?
Politically?
Yeah, political changes.
I think back in '72, I may be mistaken, perhaps it was '73, was when the council was expanded from 7 to 11.
It was 78 actually, yeah. To districts.
To districts.
Yeah.
And became went from 7 to 11 members.
Yeah.
So, but it was the first time the Latinos had an opportunity to elect someone, and that was Blanca.
Blanca Alvarado.
Mm-hmm. That was Blanca, and then came Al Garza, and now look at it.
Yeah, there are 5 Latinos on the
Yeah.
council. Yeah, 5 out of 11. So that is a big change.
Yeah, and that was caused by the redistricting.
Yeah,
It wouldn't have happened yet, I think.
would have been very slow.
Yeah.
We've got about a minute left, but we need to know what you're doing now. Tell us about Abrazos.
After the Mexico City earthquake, we rebuilt with funds we got from the viewer. We rebuilt 2 schools, and at the dedication of one of those schools, a 9-year-old got up and thanked the Bay Area for rebuilding her schools. And it was the soundbite to end all soundbites. She was tremendous. She inspired the idea. So I started a scholarship program for them, combined it with the one I already had here, and called it Abrazos in Books. Abrazos means embraces, because we also help children who are victims of something, and books because scholarships.
Yeah, great program. And how long has that been going on?
28 years.
And how do people find out about it? And give money.
well-
How do people give money?
We have those websites. We have 2 websites, abrazosinbooks.org, or the easier one is rigochacon.com.
And congratulations on your long career in journalism. You
Thank you.
really made a difference in the South Bay and San Jose.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Rigo. In the next couple of months, we'll be talking with Mayor Sam Liccardo and Supervisor Joe Simidian following their annual State of the City and State of the County addresses. Meanwhile, you can catch up on previous shows on our website at creatvsj.org or on YouTube by searching for CreaTV San Jose. And you can let us know what you think about our show and suggest future topics or guests by email at valleypolitics@creatvsj.org, on Twitter at valley_politics, and by following us on Facebook. And now that's all, folks. Thanks for watching Valley Politics. See you next time.